your ability to deal with setbacks and to manage adversity in the best possible way. I'm absolutely fascinated how some people are able to be resilient, determined, and constantly push through obstacles while other people give up really quickly. I was recently listening to the Life Coach School podcast by Brooke Castillo, and she dives into determination. Why is determination so important? Well, if you've ever had a goal, vision, objectives, you know that what makes the difference is your ability to continuously push through the obstacles, manage to harness your own discipline and focus so that you're able to reach those objectives and those goals. Several things happen when you're able to be determined and to continuously push through. You build more confidence because you start to see that you're actually making progress, that you're able to stick to your commitments, to stick to your word. This makes a huge difference. But also, you have a shift in identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who maybe gives up quite easily, you start to believe in yourself. And this is huge because one of the main reasons people fail in their work, in their life, is because they give up too quickly and they do not see themselves as someone who persevere. I recently read the book The Six Pillars of Self-Esteem, fantastic book, and in it he explains that our self-esteem is built by doing hard things. The more hard things we do, the more we push through and persevere, the stronger our self-esteem becomes. And there's a huge correlation between your self-esteem, which is the way you view yourself, and success. Because if you believe that you have the ability to push through, the ability to reach these goals, then you are far more likely to put in the effort to make it happen. When it comes to determination, there's also a theory of self-determination, and this is directly correlated with intrinsic motivation. So, as you know, there's both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. There's also intra-projected and identified motivation, but we won't dive into this today. Let's just look at intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. When it comes to having your goals and your ambitions, if you're primarily driven by external rewards, whether promotion, status, money, income, this is extrinsic motivation. Whereas if you're driven by the journey itself, the process, you actually like doing it, like me recording this live or video, this is intrinsic motivation. I often think of musicians maybe playing the guitar, playing the piano, and they're really in the flow and enjoying it. This is intrinsic motivation. And the psychologists that came up, which are both psychologists, which were Dishi and Ryan, and they came up with this self-determination theory. They show that self-determination is linked to intrinsic motivation. This was fascinating for me. It meant we can't be externally motivated, extrinsically motivated, and have self determination. I thought that was a very interesting correlation. And something else came up as I looked up this self determination theory. There are three main components here when it comes to self determination. The first one is autonomy. And autonomy is directly correlated with this concept of locus of control. This means that if you have an internal locus of control, you believe that you can influence the outcomes. You believe that by putting in the effort, you can have an impact on external outcomes. On the other hand, if you have an external locus of control, this is when you believe that things just happen and it's outside of your control and you can't do anything about it. And this can lead to a more victim mindset compared to an ownership mindset. Now, the truth is, there are things that are totally out of your control and things that are within your control. But if you put most of your energy and focus on what you can do about a situation, how you can influence it, how your actions do have an impact on the external situation, this will make you focus more on the intrinsic motivation and more on this internal locus of control. This is why it's so fundamental to shift this perspective and look a little more at what you can do about the situation. So let's come back to the three components of the self-determination theory. The first one is autonomy, linked to this locus of control. So feeling that you can choose and influence the direction that you're going in. The second component is competence. This is based on how much you invest in your own skills, and it's really a virtuous circle. The more you invest in your own skills, the more competent you become. And the more competent you are, the more likely you are to do these skills again and invest in them. And the more motivated you will be, and the more determined you will be to persevere. This is why when you begin, it can be so tough because you don't have any proof that you will have this competence. So you start to invest in it, and then you ask yourself, is this really paying off? And as you don't see the reward, as you don't see that you're becoming more competent, this can decrease your determination and motivation. What I've noticed is that there are two, well, more than two, but two main moments in which our determination or motivation decrease. The first one is when we begin, because we don't have any input. We don't have any proof that this is working. And the second time is when we hit this plateau of latent potential that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. So this is when you've been doing something for a while, you've been seeing progress, and then you suddenly reach this plateau. And again, determination will go down because you feel like you're not making any progress. Of course, you hit more than one plateau. That's why I said there were more than two times. There's a start, the plateau related potential, and then the further plateaus. I like to see our development as going up, and then we hit a bit of a plateau, we go up, hit a bit of a plateau, maybe we go down a bit, go up again, hit a plateau, etc. So this was the second component, competence. First one is autonomy, linked to this locus of control. The second one was competence. And the third one is relatedness. And this is related to our wish to belong, to be part of a community. These three components, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, are the three main components of the self-determination theory. So this is linked to self-determination. But let's look at determination in practice. What are certain things that you can do, that you can put in place that will help you to build upon this determination? For this, you can do two different things. You can either think of a role model that you think is really resilient and really determined and ask yourself, what is it that they do? How is it that they think? How do they behave? What is it that they read? What do they talk about? I really love this when I'm listening to different podcasts because I hear all these people that are highly determined, highly driven, and ambitious and resilient. And as they talk, you get nuggets about the way they think. They might say things like, if I initially don't feel like it, I override this feeling and I think of the positive outcomes. And this gets me to exercise more often in the morning. Or they might say they do cold plunges and cold dips because they feel that it builds their inner resilience and helps them to be more capable to deal with stress during the day. If you have certain role models in your life or also through podcasts or different social medias, this can help you to see how a determined and really resilient person thinks, behaves, acts, feels, and you can tap into that and imitate them, so to speak. So this is one way in which you can sort of tune in to your inner determination. Another way is to ask yourself, when was a time that you were so determined that nothing in the world would have made you stop? And try and see what were some elements there. What were certain specific things that made you feel so determined, so driven, so resilient, so ambitious? What was happening there? And how can you right now use some of these elements from the past to help you to influence how you're acting now? So this is two small exercises you can do. One, thinking about someone who is really resilient, is really determined, and imitating their way of thinking and behaving. Another way is to ask yourself, when did you show this huge amount of resilience and determination, and how can you imitate this again? And as I was listening to Brooke Castillo on the Life Coach School podcast yesterday, she mentioned a couple of things that were really interesting. One of them was that our firmness of purpose, the why behind what we're doing, is really what makes us stick through all these obstacles and challenges. And maybe if you think of a time in the past where you were able to persevere and push through certain challenges, you might be able to notice that your why was that much bigger compared to maybe something you're challenged with right now or something you're procrastinating on. So, very interesting to look how strong is the why? How many reasons do you have behind this goal, this vision, this objective that you have? And chances are, if you're procrastinating it or you're not really as determined as you'd like to be, is because the why isn't strong enough. And we want to add a bit more juice, a bit more magic to this why to make it more likely to push through. The second thing was that determination is really just a matter of continuously making the decision to persevere and to continue. It's an ongoing decision. And in such moments, I like to think about running. When I first started running again, which was only a year ago, I would have moments where every minute or so I'd want to stop. I'd think, why am I doing this? This is so tiring. Why am I doing this? I could just stop now, or now, or now. And so you keep telling yourself you could stop. And perseverance and determination really comes from continuously making the decision to renew this, to again go back and continue the run, continue going through each obstacles. So these were two cool things I learned yesterday while listening to this episode. The first one was firmness of purpose, being totally purpose driven, which helps you to be determined. And the second one was having this continuous decision. It's just making the decision over and over again to continue. So, how can you make this decision? What will help you in the long run to be determined and to have this ongoing resilience in spite of obstacles? This is something that I had never thought of before, and I only just found out. When you're feeling rushed, in a hurry, stressed, and like you need the answer now, this is when your survival brain is kicking in. Your survival brain is telling you that you need to solve this now, you need to get to this goal quickly, or you might as well give up. And most of the time, think about it, most of the time when you're not determined and you give up, it's because you haven't let yourself absorb why it's so important for you, take small baby steps and continue. You've rushed and your survival brain kicks in and says, oh, it's either working or not, let's just stop. And if you train yourself to switch from this survival brain to the more rational prefrontal cortex way of thinking, this is when you can start to build this determination. Because your prefrontal cortex, that isn't so much in a rush, has a very rational way of approaching things and will think more long term. This is the perfect illustration of, for instance, if you're determined to be fit and healthy and there's a plate of cookies in front of you. If your survival brain kicks in, it wants the calories now to keep you alive. And so you are more likely to give in to temptation. If you're able to rationalize, to pause, to take a step back, to remember your goal and your values, then your prefrontal cortex will tell you, okay, in the long run, this isn't actually what I want for myself and for my own health and well-being. And so in this specific case, you will remember that and you won't eat the cookies, right? So it's that ability to go from the survival brain to the prefrontal cortex. And this is directly correlated to what I often think about, which is that you need to slow down in order to speed up. Slowing down means putting on the brakes, calming down that survival brain, and being able to think more rationally with your prefrontal cortex. This helps you to think clearly, to make more effective decisions, and to have this long-term goal, vision, perspective in mind so that you don't succumb to instant gratification. So let's review a bit what we've discussed so far when it comes to determination. Determination is your ability to push through and continue in spite of setbacks. This is linked to the self-determination theory, which is related to intrinsic motivation, genuinely appreciating and being motivated by the journey itself. And this is correlated to the locus of control, feeling that you can influence the outcomes. In the self-determination theory, they explained that there were three main components. First one was autonomy, linked to this famous locus of control. The second one was competence, building on your skills and competence. And the third one was relatedness, feeling that you belong and that you're part of a community. And when it comes to building the skill of determination, we want to have firmness of purpose, a really strong, solid why, and we want to continuously make the decision to continue. Continuously make the decision to continue in spite of obstacles or in spite of things getting hard. And this is how you build determination, because determination is a skill, it's an asset. It's not something you have or you don't. Want to embrace the whole growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about, which is that things aren't fixed. You're not a patient or impatient person. You're not a resilient or not resilient person. You're not a determined or not determined person. At any given moment, you can build this strength. And this simply comes by, once again, making the decision to continue, to persevere, to push through the obstacles, and to not let an obstacle get in the way of your progress or your goal or your vision. One thing I took away from learning and listening to podcasts on determination and reading about it is that if all we ever do is not stop the first 2-3 times we get stuck, I actually aim to 7. I told myself I will do something 7 times before I pause and try again. This works really well for me in terms of technology, for instance. Then just by doing that, you're building determination. And this is why the most resilient entrepreneurs and the most determined entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs are the most successful ones, because each time they fall, they're able to stand up again and continue and persevere and take the next action. So it really is a strength that you can build upon. It's something that isn't innate, that you need to know from the get-go. It's something that you can work on continuously, improve, and it will be your biggest and strongest inner resource to help you with your goals, to help you to progress in your life, in your dreams, and it is something that you can continuously work on. It doesn't matter where you're at, it doesn't matter where you're standing. If, for instance, you want to start exercising again and you've never exercised before, then you start there and you do baby steps and a few push-ups every day and a small 10-minute session and a mini run, and you just build upon it. I think it's very important in this determination and resilience building not to compare ourselves with other people. Their journey is their journey. Leave it to them. Your journey is your journey. And so look at how can you start to build this inner determination? How can you make your purpose all that bigger? And how can you build the habit of not quitting every time something gets hard, but instead pushing through that next obstacle, and observe and enjoy the journey as you go along, because it's far more about appreciating the journey and the progress that you're making than it is about just growing or reaching those goals. It's a lot more about the process and the journey. So thank you for tuning in. Please write in the comments what was useful for you. What have you learned from this reflection on determination, and what helps us to be determined? Also, we'll be publishing an article on determination that you can read. Thank you so much for being here with me today. All the very best on your journey and on your own inner resource of determination and resilience.